Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's Rhone Rangers virtual event focusing on rosé wines. I'm Kim Murphy-Rodriguez, the Executive Director of the Rhone Rangers, and today's guest moderator is Chris Kern. Chris is the creator and co-host of the award-nominated One Bourbon, One Shard, or One Beer podcast. An award-winning wine writer, wine educator, and entrepreneur, Chris has worked extensively in the wine industry and is the founder of the members-only Forgotten Grapes Wine Club of over 3,000 members throughout multiple states. Thank you so much for joining us today, Chris.
Oh, Kim, it is my absolute pleasure. And it's always exciting for me when I get to talk about my favorite style of wine, which is rosé. So I am excited to be here. We've got probably four great winemakers. I think the fourth will be joining us very shortly. But what I wanted to do to start, and everybody make sure you've got your Rhone Rangers glasses and your glass of rosé ready to drink along at home. But I'd like to go around and have each of our winemakers introduce themselves. I'm going to put 60 seconds on the clock, gentlemen, so you got to keep it brief. Introduce yourself, your winery, your wine, and let us know if your wine is a direct press style rosé or a Saugny rosé, those being the two main styles. Direct press, of course, the grapes being picked specifically to be made into the rosé. Saugny, bleeding off a little bit of that free run juice when you're making a red wine, and then turning that free run juice, that first press, into a rosé. So we'll start from north to south to keep it fair with Derek Holstein from Nove Vineyards.
Hi, so I'm Derek Holstein. I've been making wine professionally since 1975 in Madeira, with the Constellation used to be United Vineyards. Christian Brothers was winemaker at Grenache for many years. Started the Trinquero brand for the Trinquero family. Back to Grenache, and then I've been making wine for several wineries at the same time as a consulting winemaker since then. So Nove is a very small vineyard. It's between, that's the label.
Yeah.
Between Middletown and Clear Lake in Lake County. It's on a hillside. It's a beautiful site with volcanic soil. It's a very red, deep red soil. The very even vineyard. It's a wonderful vineyard to work with. We have Malbec and we have Grenache there. So from the Grenache, we make a rosé, and we make a red Grenache. And so we do use Saugny for that. We pick the fruit for its optimal varietal character and balance. Luckily, the vineyard is very well balanced, so I don't have usual problems that I have with other vineyards. I do not have with that one, and it's very healthy. So fruit comes in, we press it. After a few hours, we let it sit on the skins, and then we drain the juice. We press off later for the red, but for the Saugny, we just drain. I usually wait about 4 hours because that's just the right amount of time to get the varietal character into the grapes.
You're already jumping ahead to one of my questions there, Derek.
Yes, and so ours is a salmon colored. It's a very light color. Grenache tends to be light anyway, so that's a good varietal characteristic. But we want to capture some of that kind of gritty tannin that Grenache can have, and make sure we get those varietal characters into it.
Awesome.
We ferment it cold.
Sorry, I was going to say, we'll talk a little bit more about your wine, but I do want to kind of jump to some of the other winemakers and then
okay, sure.
Jump on in the discussion. So let's go next to Nick Nahigian from Table 11 Wines.
Hello, I'm Nick Nahigian. I'm the owner of Table 11 Wines. I'm not the winemaker. If I was the winemaker, it probably wouldn't turn out that great. Been in the restaurant business for over 20 years, mainly wine director, general manager, and always wanted to make wine. So 2018, my wife and I pulled the gun. We did 1 ton of Pinot from La Encantada Vineyard. And then our third vintage, 2020, we did a little bit of rosé. I work with Joey Gumer from Transcendence Winery. Him and his wife, Syrah, have a small little winery in Santa Barbara. I've been a winemaker there for many years. And I've just loved his really clean expression of fruit and just kind of hands-off approach. And really getting fruit from great vineyards. And this vineyard is the Vogelzang vineyard, Mary Vogelzang at Happy Canyon, mainly known for Bordeaux varietals, but she does have some beautiful Sauvignon Blanc and Grenache Noir. I believe this vineyard is planted about 98, 99. So it's got some little bit of that old fruit, old vine intensity to it. And we got the grapes just for this one wine. We don't, so fresh press, and we don't pick it super early. I know some people pick it very early, but it does have that nice, beautiful, salmon color, as he was mentioning. And it's got a little bit of that nice ripe fruit, but not overripe. So I think this one we picked around 23 and a half, 28, if I remember, and capturing that natural acidity to it, and just let it sit on the lees for about 3 or 4 months. We don't stir the lees because we really like the aromatics, and bottle it. This one was bottled end of January and release it in late spring.
Very nice.
And so, yeah.
And I have completely blown up the geographic run on this one. So we will move on to Aaron Guerrero from Rhonedonnee Wines. Aaron, introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name is Aaron Guerrero, owner and winemaker for Rhonedonnee Wines. So I started in the wine industry back in 2016 when I was going to Cal Poly. Just fell in love with wine while I was going to school there, studying for engineering of all things versus viticulture, enology, and found myself working for several wineries in the area as I completed my degrees. Fast forward to 2017, which is our first vintage under this label and the start of Rhonedonnee Wines. Our main focus is Rhone varietals, obviously, being Rhonedonnee Wines. And for our Rosé, we focus on Mourvèdre and Grenache based Rosé. In years past, we've worked with Syrah. This year, this vintage, we did not do the Syrah. My second son was being born in November. That kind of threw a curveball to harvest. So we ended up just working with the Mourvèdre and Grenache. This vintage is primarily Mourvèdre, so 75%, which is also Mourvèdre is one of my favorite varietals. It's a lovely varietal. I prefer the savory elements that it offers in a rosé, and that's why I enjoy using that in our rosés. But then I also appreciate the Grenache aspect as well, of bringing the aromatics and some of the more red fruit qualities. So yeah. And what we're pouring today, or what I have in my glass, is Trailside flowers.
Spoiler alert, I do too. But yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but let's meet our last winemaker. Our furthest north winemaker, coming in from Southern Oregon, from Plaisance Ranch, we have Joe Ginet. Joe, how are you? Can you hear us, Joe? He appears to be unmuted, but we cannot hear him. But that's okay. Hopefully we'll get the technical difficulty fixed, and we'll get Joe's, you'll learn all about Joe coming up shortly. So gentlemen, we've got a couple of Grenache Rosé producers. Aaron, you focus on Grenache and Mourvèdre. I know Joe's Rosé is 100% Mourvèdre. What is it about those particular varietals that you think makes such a strong rosé, or they seem to dominate the rosé wine industry? Let's start with you, Derek.
So what do I think Grenache does, or with
Grenache and Mourvèdre, but you work primarily with Grenache for your
I've worked with Mourvèdre before, but so I know the difference. But Grenache, what I think it contributes the most to, that's most interesting to rosé, that's different from other ones, because I also make Cabernet Rosé from a different winery, is it has a distinctive nose, but most of the mouthfeel has this kind of a sort of a tannin that affects your mouth in a different way than the other ones. It's not a chewy tannin. It's more of, I think of it as sort of a gritty tannin. It's and some people call it a spicy character. I think it's and it has a flavor that's very fruity. This particular vineyard is very lively with fruit, so I love to see that. And my challenge every year has been to really enhance that. So we ferment the wine very cold, usually between 45 and 48 degrees for a long period of time, to try to keep that character in the wine and to enhance it over time. So Grenache is just quite unique, whereas something like Cabernet is more like watermelons or something else. And Grenache doesn't have a lot of color. It's a lighter color, and it really lends well to the salmon color. I like to capture some of the pink that's in there, so we have a little pink highlight. And the 2019 shows that pretty well still. The 2008 has a hint of it, 2018. But I think Grenache is just a unique character of the varietal, which, it's spicy. It's got a little bit of this gritty tannin, nice long finish.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Nick, you also work with Grenache. Did you find a lot of the same characteristics when you decided to make a rosé, that you kind of lean towards Grenache?
I do. I like that light color. It's funny he mentions the tannins, because I think it really helps. There's subtle tannins to me, and this particular vineyard, what geared me towards this is Joey was my winemaker, gets grapes from this for his rosé too. And it's got that nice, bright fruit that you get, like almost strawberry fruit you get, and the aromatics, but it has this beautiful zestiness to it as well. Literally like stone fruit zestiness to it with natural acidity. And so that kind of balance of that earthy kind of, zest and fresh fruit really gives a really fun, lively feeling to the rosé, and the complexity that I think works well with various foods. I think I can drink rosé year round. I think it's something that if I don't know what to drink, it's either a cold beer or a rosé. So it's it's like, all right, what am I going to do? So, give me a Pilsner, give me a rosé. And, it's fun just seeing, for me, like this wine in particular, I love seeing how it changes with temperature. You take it ice cold out of the fridge and it's like, wow, there's a lot more of that like oregano, verbena zest going on. And as the wine warms up, you're getting more ripe flavors all around. And they're both equally as good, enjoyable, but just kind of different. So it's like, oh, I kind of want to go back to a little bit of cooler, put it back in the fridge, or I kind of like where it's going because what I'm eating now or what I'm doing. So just kind of the complexity of that, and it ages well. Yeah. I popped a 2020 last week, and I couldn't believe how fresh the acidity was. Yeah. And the color stayed the same, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. I didn't expect that. So
yeah, I definitely want to come back and talk about the ageability of rosés, because I think that's an important thing that's lost on a lot of consumers and even some retailers out there. But before we do that, Aaron, you obviously work with Grenache as well, but you have said, this rosé is more Mourvèdre heavy. What caused that transition? Was it just kind of what you had available, or have you been leaning towards focusing more on Mourvèdre?
Like I said, Mourvèdre is my favorite varietal. So, and for that reason, this year is primarily Mourvèdre. I also picked up a new vineyard to work with Mourvèdre, so I had more of it to go around. Don't get me wrong, I love the Grenache aspect of this rosé, but I tend to use the Grenache component more for the aromatics and for the acidity that it brings, because as we all know, Mourvèdre is acid deficient. Some vineyards are worse than others, so having that acid component brings balance to the wine. So, but primarily for Mourvèdre, it's all about just the characteristics you get from that. Like I said, more savory notes, and I enjoy that in my wine, especially rosé. Like I feel like, and I failed to mention, I've totally forgot. This is Saunier style, so everything is Saunier, no direct to press, and I prefer Saunier over direct to press for several reasons. Just the different textures you get from Saunier from extra maceration time. Yes, the consequence is you pick up more color, but with that comes flavor and texture in a rosé, and that's what I often look for in a rosé. So that I think Mourvèdre plays well to that style. Interesting. And bringing out some of those nuanced, more earthy, more savory elements.
Yeah. Interesting. So, Nick, you're the only one making a direct press rosé. Joe, it looks like you're still muted. Hopefully you can join me. I'd love to ask you some questions. Cough twice if you're there. But Nick, why did you make the decision to go direct press rather than Saunier style?
That's a good question. You know, it's really good fruit. And I think Rosé, you know, many conversations with Joey about this, can be a really hard wine to make because you're just getting clean, fresh press of the juice. And so any flaws that you're going to get will show up naturally in the vineyard. So we're very particular about when we pick and getting really good grapes. And so, you know, I just want to kill a wine, to be honest. And so it's, you know, getting really good fruit, and I want that fruit to shine. And I want to just have the consistency of year after year of knowing that I'm getting kind of that same characteristic in my rosé every year. So.
Nice. Now, all three of you, it's interesting, mentioned the color of the wine as a prominent feature of it, which you don't necessarily hear that when people are talking about whites and with reds, but with rosé, it seems like that color comes up all the time. What is the ideal color for a rosé, and do you think that the color is actually something that affects it on the market in terms of its viability with consumers, or have you found that's not much of an issue? Derek, what are your thoughts on the color?
Well, I think color is the primary hook for consumers. You know, when you go into a room and go into a retail outlet and there's an entire wall of rosé, there's a myriad of colors. And some people are going to like wines, you know, Mourvèdre is probably more purple than Grenache, you know, so some people are going to gravitate towards that, or even Syrah, or I don't know, Petit Syrah might be, I don't know too many Petit Syrah rosés, but Syrah certainly has a beautiful pink color, more purple. If you want salmon, which is a lighter, more delicate color, and it sort of gives you the idea the wine is going to be that way, then you go more towards Grenache, which has the salmon color typically, and it has a lot of delicate complexities built into the wine that go along with that color. But I think it's really a matter of what the buyer wants, and that's one of the nice things about, and I think the attractive things about rosé is that you have this huge array of colors that you can choose from.
Yeah.
And you know, it's like beer, you have so many different choices. You can choose, you know, IPA, or you want a Trappist style, or whatever, all these different things. That's you can see it with rosé because for the most part, it's put in clear glass for that reason, you know.
Mm-hmm. Joe chimed in and said he likes the salmon color. He finds that more attractive with his rosé. Aaron, how about you? Because your rosé is definitely on the darker spectrum of the four that we've got here today, because it's so driven by Mourvèdre, I imagine. But at the same time, it's still very translucent, and you know, you would say this is closer in spirit to the lighter ones than it is to more of a Tavel style, or you know, some of the Côte de Rhone rosés, which can get very dark because of the added Syrah to them.
Yeah, and on that point, like Tavel is definitely an inspiration for us for rosé. Those are some of the best rosés that I enjoy drinking, they're often Saunier or combination of Saunier, direct press, and extended maceration, which why they're so dark. And that's what I do with our rosé as well. So I do longer maceration on the skins, so it tends to pick up more color. It makes sense. I mean, Grenache does end up being paler. I only let it sit on the skins for about 12 to 14 hours. Mourvèdre is probably about 14 to 16 hours, a little bit longer. But I'm not afraid of the color. I've my previous vintage, I had Syrah in there, and that really gave it a deeper color, which it's all for me. It's like visually, I want to pay attention to what's in the glass. I just want to make it look pretty, but also what it does to your palate, and then on the nose too. Like aromatically and palate are important as much as color.
Nice. Nick, yours is probably the lightest of the four, real close to Joe's actually. But where would you rank those three things that Aaron just mentioned, kind of color, aromatics, and then flavor, in terms of what's most important for a rosé?
Kind of back to what Derek said, I think it's the beauty of rosé is there's so many different styles. Depends what you like. I love aromatics in wine a lot. And so, depending on what you like, I mean, I'm actually thinking of making a second rosé just because I like rosé so much. And as a vineyard that's a lot cooler in weather, and I'm going to get a completely different expression of grapes. So it's because I like rosé so much. And so that'll probably be a little lighter color, maybe. But I might, again, I don't want those underripe flavors, so I might let that go a little bit. So I think it's, kind of all three are really important, but it just kind of depends what you like. And so if you like, certain varietals of red wines, let's say, you're probably going to gravitate towards that area of rosés that you would like. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Do you find when you're overseeing the production and talking to your winemaker that you're having him try to emulate certain styles of rosé, or is it much more about making your own unique style?
Balance. Honestly, it's for us, it's especially for rosé. To me, it's 100% about balance. I just want to capture ripe fruit flavors and good acidity, but obviously not overripe. And like I said before, capturing some of those earthy characteristics as well, some of the herbaceous qualities and zest and things like that. So really about getting balance, and if we're getting really that clean expression of fruit, just really capturing that in the glass and just not messing with it and capturing those aromatics. So every last year's vintage, a little bit different than this year's vintage. So just a little bit more riper flavors this year, although we picked it a little less bricks. So it's interesting how that works.
Yeah. How about you, Derek? Do you have certain styles of rosé or other regions that make rosé that you're trying to emulate or at least have in mind when you go into the onto the press area, or are you really focusing just on the fruit in front of you and what you've got to work with?
Well, all of those things, but mostly, when you asked Nick about which was more important, I think from a point of view of the, let's say that a consumer comes into a shop and they're looking for a wine and they've never tasted the wines they're looking at, they're going to be attracted to what they like, of course. So the color needs to be something that's attractive because that's the first thing they see. That's why we put rosé in clear glass, even though it's really not good for rosé to be in clear glass. We do that because we want the consumer to see what they're buying. And then the aroma is the next thing that they experience. So that has to be captivating. And for me, what has to be important there, and I agree with Nick about balance in all directions. The nose needs to be complex and interesting. It needs to have really good varietal character, but it also needs to capture, since we're working with a single vineyard, in my mind, we're looking to capture those details that are in that particular vineyard that make it different from other ones. So I look for that, and I try to envision while we're working with the grapes this time of year and on to harvest, try to figure out, well, what are those characteristics, as we taste the grapes and then make the wine and see how it develops in the tank. We start to learn those things, especially over a period of years. You start to recognize, oh, well, this is Nove. We know what that tastes like. And we want that to come across in the nose so that people will be able to identify that. And then when they taste it, it should be there as well. The complexity of the varietal character, the earthiness that Nick also talked about a little bit, the mineral qualities that come from the earth. My idea of a model is more European, I think, than California in most of the wines that I make. And it's probably a little outdated because wineries in California have come so far. But the European models generally the wines age longer. They tend to be more complex and have less of the same kinds of defects we have. We don't have very many wines with any defects anymore. People make good quality everywhere. But instead of a singular approach and having something that's so focused that it's simple, I want something that's more complex. And the mineral qualities of the vineyard, the fruitiness, the particular Grenache characters, and the tannin and the mouthfeel. All of those things have to come together in a way that is memorable and is interesting.
Yeah, I want to circle back to that idea of complexity and whether that's something that you guys have seen consumers picking up on as rosé has become more popular over the last 2, 5, 10 years. But before we get to that, I really want to touch on this idea of ageability, because we have rosés here from 19, 20, and 21. And Aaron, you've got a 20. Talk to me a little bit about the ageability of rosé, because there's so many consumers, retailers, opinion makers in the space who it's one and done when it comes to a rosé vintage, and they don't want to see anything that's not the most recent model. What do you think about ageability, and how do you change the mindset of wine consumers and retailers that older or vintage rosés can be just as enjoyable, if not even more enjoyable and more complex than the new model?
Yeah, the complexity. So for our style, like Saunier lends itself, especially with extended maceration, you're picking up more tannin structure to go along with the acid in the fruit. So right there, you're creating a wine that has more complexity right from adding more tannin than say a direct press or less skin contact. And with that, that provides ageability just from a chemical standpoint. Like you're creating chemical compounds that are more stable, so that increases the ageability. As far as education to the consumer, that's on us. That's on us to explain that to them, and we try to do that with our consumers, explain to what we do and why we do that, and for these reasons, and not to be afraid of. I'm not going to say hold this rosé for 5+ years, but easily 2 to 3, no problem. Maybe longer, but